This is the South China Sea, and this is the West Philippine Sea. As you can see, they overlap with each other. That is the very reason why there is a dispute in this part of the sea, and it has been a contested area for centuries. But why? Why does China's territory overlap with the Philippines' territory? And what is the West Philippine Sea? Is it a legitimate territorial claim for the Philippines? Well, welcome to the West Philippine Sea.
This has never happened this close to Philippine shore, and so it caught everybody off guard.
We were told to wake up and put our life jackets on because we've just been rammed by a Chinese boat.
I already made a previous video explaining the 9-dash line. In that video, we thoroughly explained China's claim in the South China Sea. As we know, China's claim is based on their so-called 9-dash line, right? So I think before or after watching this video, you should also watch that video to understand the situation in this conflict in more detail. Of course, I made a video about the 9-dash line, so it's only fair to also make a video explaining the West Philippine Sea. The term West Philippine Sea was adopted by the Philippine government in 2012 in response to China's claim on the Spratly Islands and Scarborough Shoal. If you watched that video, you already know that China's 9-dash line contradicts the UNCLOS rules regarding the Exclusive Economic Zone, or EEZ, of every country. But what about the West Philippine Sea? Is it a legitimate claim? Well, the short answer is yes. You see, the West Philippine Sea falls within the EEZ of the Philippines. If we look at the map, the extent of the West Philippine Sea is within 200 nautical miles from the coastal baselines of the Philippines, meaning, by international maritime law, it is a legal claim. The line obviously encompasses the Spratly Islands and Scarborough Shoal. But the problem is that China's 9-dash line also covers the Spratly Islands and Scarborough Shoal, which is where the conflict arises. In the West Philippine Sea, many islands contested by China are actually within the West Philippine Sea, such as the Calayan Island Group, which is part of the Spratly Islands. Scarborough Shoal is also within the vicinity of the West Philippine Sea. The Recto Bank, or Reed Bank, is obviously inside this line too. However, all the territories I mentioned are also within the 9-dash line. Now it's clear who has the right to claim this part, at least from a legal perspective. But why does China keep insisting that these islands belong to them when it's obviously not the case? Well, it's because of the benefits that this area could provide. Well, I think the #1 reason why the West Philippine Sea is so important is because of its strategic location. I've mentioned this numerous times in my previous videos, but just to make it clear, this area is one of the busiest maritime routes in the world, facilitating over $3 trillion worth of trade annually. This means that most merchant vessels transporting goods from one country to another are likely to pass through this area. And if we look at the map again, the West Philippine Sea covers almost half of the maritime pathway in this region. So think about it. If the Philippines could finally claim this sea as their own, without any contestation, the country would become wealthy. I'm not exaggerating, but this would only happen if the Philippines has the right plan and system for developing strategic locations in maritime and global trade. However, achieving this is difficult because China has already built artificial islands in this part of the sea and is likely planning to build more. If China continues to do this, the Philippines and other nations claiming parts of the Spratly Islands, like Brunei, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Taiwan, will be at a disadvantage because China already has bases in this area. Imagine these countries fighting over these territories while China is already ahead because it has military bases on these islands. That's why even the USA is supporting these nations against China. The US knows that if China successfully claims this area, it will gain a huge advantage in global trade and possibly surpass the US. And we all know the US doesn't want that to happen, right?
America is #1!
Anyway, let's get back to the West Philippine Sea. As I stated, owning this part of the sea would give a country a significant boost in the global economy due to its advantage in maritime trade. But that's not the only benefit this sea can offer. It is said that the Recto Bank contains huge reserves of oil and natural gas, so whoever owns this area will enjoy these natural resources, which will undoubtedly have a big impact on the country's growth. The Scarborough Shoal and the Spratly Islands can also contribute to the economy by providing additional marine resources, and there are still plenty of them in this area. Now we understand why China is so eager to contest this territory, because of all the benefits that owning these areas could bring. Now, to strengthen our argument, it's crucial to delve into the history and legal documentation concerning the West Philippine Sea. Just as we approached the 9-line issue and concluded it lacks validity, what about the West Philippine Sea? Historically, from around 3000 BCE, the ancestors of modern Filipinos, known as Austronesians, were already sailing and living in the area encompassing the West Philippine Sea. The history of Filipino ancestors is complex and characterized by diverse influences including Negrito or the Eta, Malay, Indo, Chinese, Spanish, American, and Japanese. The Negritos were believed to have arrived in the Philippines 30,000 to 40,000 years ago, and the Austronesians came approximately 5,000 years ago, migrating from Taiwan. But you might think that if Austronesians came from Taiwan, they must be Chinese? Well, no. Despite Taiwan's proximity to China, the Austronesians inhabited the island long before Chinese migration. Thus, they are not Chinese. This historical background illustrates that Filipino ancestors have used and inhabited the West Philippine Sea for millennia. By around 500 BCE, these early Filipinos had established extensive trade networks across the region, with fishing becoming a primary livelihood in the West Philippine Sea. Now, that was about the historical reference. Regarding legal documentation, according to the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, the West Philippine Sea falls within the Philippines 200 nautical miles from its baseline, affirming Philippine ownership under international law. In 2016, the Arbitral Tribunal, ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration in The Hague, ruled in favor of the Philippines, invalidating China's expansive claims and affirming the Philippines' rights to its exclusive economic zone, or EEZ. However, the problem was that despite this ruling, China rejected it and continued to assert its claims based on the 9-line. Moreover, China has constructed 7 artificial islands in this area, triggering more tensions with neighboring countries. And recently, China further escalated tensions by releasing a new map with an additional dash line behind Taiwan, triggering more international concern. Of course, those actions triggered more tensions. Why did they add one more dash line? Well, I discussed that already in our previous video, so it's better to watch that as well. Anyway, the West Philippine Sea is clearly a valid map that should be honored by China. But then again, because of the greed of this nation, I don't think they will stop claiming this sea. But hopefully the dispute in the South China Sea and West Philippine Sea won't trigger war in the future. I guess the Philippines should never stop fighting for their rights in this sea, because clearly their claim to the West Philippine Sea is more valid than China's imaginary 9-line. But I'm afraid that at the end of the day, whoever holds the most power will win. I mean, look at the situation in these disputes. Despite the unclear territorial situation in this sea, China has proceeded to build artificial islands in the South China Sea, even within the vicinity of the West Philippine Sea, and no one can stop them. Even the US can do nothing about it because America has no direct control in this sea. All they can do is support the Philippines. However, China has already finished building those artificial islands, so what more can be done? I think in the future, China will build more infrastructure in this sea to solidify their claim to these territories. But then again, at the end of the day, the world knows which territories really belong to each country.